To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Scout Finch, whose real name was Jean Louise Finch, thought her brother's broken arm was all the Yule's fault. It was because of them. She was sure of it. But her big brother, Jeremy Atticus Finch, saw it differently. He believed it all started that summer, the summer they met Dill. Scout and Jem argued about it. They argued so much that it almost turned into a fight. So they did what they always did when things got tricky. They went to their father, Atticus. Atticus Finch was a lawyer in their small town, Maycomb, Alabama. He was wise and calm, and they knew they could trust him. He listened to their story, and in the end, he just smiled and said, "You're both right." Atticus had been raising them alone since their mother passed away. Scout had been only 2 years old, and Jem was 6. They weren't really alone, though. They had Calpurnia, Cal as they called her, their housekeeper. She was a loyal part of their family, caring for them ever since Jem was born. That summer, Dill came to town for the first time. His real name was Charles Baker Harris, but everyone called him Dill. He was small, but full of energy and imagination. He had come to Maycomb to spend the summer with his aunt. And soon enough, he, Jem, and Scout became best friends. Always together. But there was one thing that caught their attention. Something that pulled them in, time and again. With a touch of mystery, Boo Radley, the man who never left his house, the one everyone talked about, yet no one truly knew. Scout was a smart girl, bright beyond her years. But school was something she couldn't stand. From day one, it was a disaster. Miss Caroline was new to town. She didn't understand the local families very well yet. When Scout tried to explain why Walter Cunningham wouldn't borrow lunch money, it didn't go well. Scout told her, "The Cunninghams never take anything they can't pay back." But Miss Caroline didn't understand. She thought Scout was being rude, and to everyone's shock, she smacked Scout's hand with a ruler. Scout was angry. She felt embarrassed by Walter Cunningham. So out in the schoolyard, she found him and gave him quite a whopping. Jem, her older brother, saw what was happening. He quickly stepped in and stopped the fight. Then he made things right by inviting Walter to their house for supper, knowing he was hungry. During the meal, Calpurnia, Cal, noticed how Scout was acting. She took Scout into the kitchen for a serious talk about good manners. Scout hated school. She wanted nothing more than to stay home, where she felt safe. But Atticus, her father, had a different view. He sat down with Scout and taught her about the importance of tolerance and how to get along with others. It was a lesson that would stay with Scout, one that would help her navigate the challenges of growing up. One day, while walking home from school, Scout spotted something surprising. It was chewing gum, tucked away in a knothole of the oak tree, right outside the Radley place. The Radleys lived there, Mr. and Mrs. Radley, and their reclusive son, Boo. Boo was the center of many stories, tales filled with mystery and even a bit of fear. When Scout found the gum, she was excited. But Jem, her older brother, was horrified. He told her to spit it out right away. Scout stubbornly argued, saying, "I've been chewing it all afternoon, and I ain't dead yet." But that wasn't the only surprise. Later, they discovered a velvet box hidden in the tree. and inside were 2 Indian head pennies. Dill came back for the summer, full of energy and excitement. The 3 of them played together, creating games that filled their days with fun. One game involved rolling a rubber wheel with Scout inside. It was thrilling, until it crashed right into the Radleys' yard. That scared Scout out of her wits. Jem laughed at Scout for being scared. He believed Boo was dead, so he thought there was nothing to fear. But Scout had heard something different. She had heard laughter coming from inside the house, and she knew deep down that Boo was still there. Jem and Dill often left Scout out of their secret plans, just because she was a girl. Feeling left out, Scout sought comfort with her neighbor and mentor, Miss Maudie. Miss Maudie was a kind widow. She reassured Scout, saying most of the rumors about Boo were just that, rumors. If Boo were dead, she would have seen him carried out of the house by now. One day, the 3 kids came up with a clever plan. They wanted to pass a note to Boo to see if they could get him to come outside. Their idea was to attach the note to the end of a fishing pole and cast it toward the Radley place. But just as they were about to do it, their father, Atticus Finch, happened to walk by. Atticus caught them red-handed. He was not happy at all. He told them it wasn't right to bother Boo Radley and said, "Leave him alone." Dill was leaving in the morning. That meant it was the last chance for the kids to catch a glimpse of Boo Radley. So, under the cover of darkness, they made their plan. They sneaked under the Radleys' fence and hoisted Jem up to the window, but when he looked inside, he couldn't see a thing. Suddenly, a shadowy figure appeared. Fear took over, and they ran for their lives. As Scout stumbled in the collard greens, they heard a loud shotgun blast ring out behind them. Once they made it back to the house, Jem, Dill, and Scout noticed a crowd gathering down the street. Curiosity got the best of them, so they moseyed over to find out what happened. They overheard a false report that Mr. Radley had shot a Negro in his collard patch. It sent a chill through the children. But then Atticus noticed something odd. He saw that Jem wasn't wearing any pants. They had gotten caught in the wire fence during their escape. To smooth things over, Dill quickly made up a story to appease their father for the moment. Jem knew he had to get his britches back by morning, so with a mix of bravery and fear, he decided to go back in the middle of the night. Weeks later, as Jem and Scout were walking home from school, Jem shared a secret. He told Scout what he'd seen the night he went back to the Radley house to retrieve his pants. He'd found them folded neatly across the fence, almost like someone had been expecting him. And the tears in the cloth, they had been mended by hand. Over time, the old oak tree near the Radley house became a place of wonder for Jem and Scout. It turned into a treasure trove filled with small gifts, trinkets, even pocket watches. But one day, they found the knothole plugged with cement. Nathan Radley had closed it up, and Jem felt a deep sadness, like he had lost something special. That winter was the coldest anyone could remember. Mrs. Radley passed away from natural causes, though Scout and Jem secretly wished there was more to the story. Something mysterious. They joked that maybe Boo had finally gotten her. Then one day, Scout saw something she'd never seen before: snow. She thought the world was ending, but Atticus gently explained that it was just precipitation. School was canceled, even though there wasn't enough snow to make a snowball. But that didn't stop Jem. He spent the whole day building a snowman that looked suspiciously like their grouchy neighbor. That day's fun didn't last, though. After nightfall, a fire broke out, and Miss Maudie's home was destroyed. Atticus told Jem and Scout to wait outside, by the Radley house, while he went to help. When the flames were finally put out, Jem and Scout came back inside, and Atticus noticed something unusual. Scout was wrapped in a blanket they didn't recognize. They soon realized it must have been Boo Radley who had covered Scout up that cold night. That's when Jem spilled everything, the knothole, the pants, and all the strange little clues they'd found. Atticus decided to let things be, hoping that one day Jem and Scout might have the chance to thank Boo personally. Back at school, Scout was ready to punch her classmate Cecil Jacobs. He had said something nasty, claiming her father defended niggers. But she held back, remembering her promise to Atticus. He'd warned her that if he caught her fighting again, she'd be in big trouble. Later, Atticus confirmed that he was indeed defending Tom Robinson in an upcoming trial. But he gently asked Scout not to use the N-word, saying it was common and disrespectful. He knew people would say mean things in the coming months, and he wanted Scout and Jem to learn how to control their tempers. At Christmas dinner at Finch's Landing, another argument erupted. This time, it was with Scout's cousin, Francis. He called Atticus a nigger lover, and while Scout didn't know exactly what it meant, she could tell it was meant to insult. Unable to hold back, Scout fought Francis and gave him a good punch. Atticus was concerned about the harsh world his children were growing up in. He worried it might turn them bitter, or even worse, that they might catch the town's disease of racism and narrow-mindedness. Scout thought of her father, Atticus, as old, even though he wasn't quite 50. She compared him to the other fathers who smoked, drank, and played cards. But Atticus was different. He wore glasses and was almost always reading. When Jem and Scout got air rifles, Atticus shared a special rule with them. He told them he'd rather they not shoot any animals, but if they did, they must never harm a mockingbird. Mockingbirds don't hurt anyone, he explained. They just sing for those who listen. Hurting one would be a sin. Soon after, questions about Atticus's strength were put to rest. A rabid dog had wandered near the Finch house, and the sheriff, Heck Tate, called for Atticus to handle it. When the children asked why Atticus had never mentioned this talent, their neighbor Miss Maudie explained, "Decent people don't brag about their skills." That day, Jem and Scout learned an important lesson about humility and felt a quiet pride in their father. Just 2 doors down from the Finches lived Mrs. Henry Lafayette Dubose, a sharp-tongued, bitter old woman. Every time Scout and Jem walked past her yard, she hurled insults at them. Even so, Atticus always treated her with respect and advised his kids to do the same and ignore her harsh words. One day, though, Mrs. Dubose flung an especially nasty comment about Atticus, and Jem couldn't hold back. Furious, he took it out on her beloved camellia bushes, cutting them down until they were nothing but stumps. Atticus found out about it and was not happy. As punishment, he insisted Jem apologize, and Mrs. Dubose gave him a task that felt worse than anything. Jem would have to read to her 2 hours a day for a whole month. Scout went along to keep Jem company. Every reading session, Mrs. Dubose would sit and listen until she would suddenly fall into a fit, cutting the visit short. But as time passed, something changed. The reading sessions began to last longer, and her fits came later and later. Jem didn't understand it, but he kept showing up, just as Atticus had asked him to. About a month after Jem's reading duties ended, Mrs. Dubose passed away. Only then did Jem learn that his reading had helped her through her own personal battle. She had been fighting a morphine addiction, determined to kick it before she died. With Jem's help, she finally succeeded. With quiet strength, Atticus explained to Jem that real courage isn't about being strong with a gun. True courage is knowing you're defeated before you start, but still going on and seeing it through to the end. Jem was deeply moved by this experience, and he began to understand courage in a whole new way.